Councilmember Lovell.
Here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum. First item is the approval of the agenda. Councilmember.
I move to approve the agenda for the Public Works Committee meeting, July 10th, 2023.
Second.
That's the, I have a motion by Councilmember Edson, a second by Councilmember Lovell, to approve the agenda. No discussion. Roll call, please.
Chairman DeMauro.
Aye.
Vice Chairperson Edson.
Aye.
Councilmember Pryor.
Aye.
Councilmember Lovell.
Aye.
Thank you. That's 4 ayes. Next up, public comments. Any public comments? Okay. Okay, moving on. First item of business is the approval of the June 12th, 2023 Public Works Committee action letter.
Chair,
Yes, Councilmember.
I move to approve the June 12th, 2023 Public Works Action Letter.
Second.
Yeah, I have a motion by Councilmember Pryor and a second by Councilmember Lovell approving the June 12th, 2023 Public Works action letter. Any discussion? And roll call, please.
Chairman DeMauro,
Aye.
Vice Chairperson Edmondson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryor,
Aye.
Councilmember Lovell,
Aye.
That's 4 ayes, approving the June 12th, 2023 action letter. Next up, TMP 2718, an ordinance awarding the bid for project number 22-109A-1 for the rehabilitation of runway 1129, taxiway B and taxiway C to Deller Construction, Inc. in the amount of $614,498.45 and authorizing the city manager to execute. Michael.
Good afternoon, Mike Anderson, Deputy Director of Public Works over Operations. As you said, this is for the award of the contract for the runway 1129, taxiway Alpha, taxiway Bravo, taxiway Charlie, joint seal and rehab. So I've put the little diagram up on the board just so you can kind of put it all in perspective, because sometimes when we talk about taxiway or runway 1129, taxiway Alpha Bravo, doesn't mean a lot to people. So that's what that is. The difference in the colors is essentially just the where the funding source is coming from. As you know, this is primarily funded through federal grants. It's a mixture of grants, so it works out to be about 92% federal funds and 8% local funds. So Skedella, we did get 4 bids for the project. We had 2 that were grouped really low. There was our engineer's estimate in the middle, and we had 2 that were grouped a little higher. So we are familiar with, we did go with the low bids with Skedella. They have done work for us in the past on roadways, and we certainly have had no problems. This work is a little bit different in that it's a different standards and specifications, but essentially the work is the same. So we certainly feel confident in our bid and this contractor, so we recommend award of the contract. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions from the council? Nope.
Chair. I move to recommend to council for approval TMP 2718, an ordinance bid for project number 22-109A-1 for the rehabilitation of runway 11-29, taxiway B and taxiway C to Skedella Construction, Inc. in the amount of $1,498.45 and authorizing the city manager to
Second.
Do I have a motion by Councilmember Edson, second by Councilmember Lovell, moving TMP 27? Any discussion on the motion? Call, please.
Chairman DeMauro,
Aye.
Vice Chairperson Edson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryor,
Aye.
Councilmember Lovell,
Aye.
Thank you. That's 4 ayes, moving TMP 2718 to the full council with a recommendation of approval. Up TMP 715, an ordinance approving the award of RFQ number 2023-054 to purchase engineering services on an as-needed basis for a 1-year term with Paracon Consultants, Inc. and authorized.
Good afternoon. Brian Page, Facility Manager. We previously had an engineering firm under contract to provide structural and civil services for us on an as-needed basis. They got bought out, so they are no longer available to us, and so we went out for this bid and have awarded a dual contract. And necessary to, if you're doing work on a roof or the parking garage or, you know, any structure like that, you want to back up from an engineer to sign off and say what you're doing is the proper way. So that's what this is all about.
Pretty straightforward.
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Chair. Move to recommend for approval at City Council ordinance TMP 2715, an ordinance approving the award of RFQ number 2023-054 to purchase engineering services on an as-needed basis for a one-year term with up to 4 one-year renewals to Branch Pattern Incorporated, contract number 2023-054-1, and to Terracon Consultants Incorporated, contract number 2023-054-2, and authorizing the city manager to execute the same for the city.
Second.
I have a motion by Councilmember Lovell, second by Councilmember Edson, moving TMP 2715 to the full council with a recommendation of approval. Call, please.
Chairman DeMauro,
Aye.
Vice Chairperson Edson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryor,
Aye.
Councilmember Lovell,
Aye.
Ayes, moving TMP 2715 to the full council. Next up, TMP 2721, an ordinance approving modification number 5 to the agreement with Crawford, Murphy and Tilley, Inc. for an on-call professional planning and engineering services for the airport, RFQ number 2022-067 in the amount of $73,000, and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
Good afternoon again. Mike Anderson, Deputy Director of Public Works Operations. This modification number 5 is directly related to the construction contract with Scadeller that we talked about. This modification is for the construction phase services of that project. I will say, if you're anything like me, you look at that price and you say, wow, that's seems like pretty high for that type of project. I will say, just in that regard, because it is an FAA project, they do expect full-time inspection coverage. So if a contractor is on the job, they do have inspection staff on there. And because of the way this project is scheduled, it's a very short time frame. Much of the work is at night, so there will probably be a lot of overtime, and that's one of the reasons that's high. Also, on the hourly rate they estimate it based on our on-call rate, which is actually higher than what they'll bill. I would anticipate it probably coming in about half of what this is. But there again, it's also for the FAA. We don't want to have to go back with a granted modification, so we tend to estimate a little bit high to make sure we have ourselves covered in case there are things. There is some pavement repair, and sometimes when you get in the pavement repair and you start removing old pavement, it expands a little bit more than you think, and some of those services may need to be increased. So just kind of a little bit of a little additional coverage in there just to be sure. So again, this is also covered by the federal grant, so on average 92% federal grant and 8% local match. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Michael, essentially, Murphy, Tilley, Crawford, Murphy, and Tilley would be certifying to the FAA that the project was.
Yes,
It takes us out of being, liability is a strong word, but they are the professional. They're saying it.
right. So they will be out there full-time inspection. They take the material samples, they do all the material testing, they review and approve all of the material submittals. They'll submit all the paperwork to the FAA for project closeout. They verify the prevailing wage and all the contract requirements, much like our guys would do on the highway projects. But on the airport projects, it's a very specialized and unique set of standards through the FAA that they're much more versed at than we are. And especially when you have a project that is federally reimbursable, it makes a lot more sense to do that with them. So.
I know you. Motion.
Chair,
Councilmember Pryor.
I move to recommend approval from council ordinance number TMP 2721, ordinance approving modification number 5 to the agreement with Crawford Murphy and Tilly, Inc. for on-call professional planning and engineering services for the airport RFQ number 2020-067 in the amount of $73,000 and authorizing the city manager to execute an agreement for the same.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Pryor, a second by Councilmember Edson, moving TMP to with a recommendation of approval. Call, please.
Chairman DeMoro,
Aye.
Vice Chairperson Edson,
Aye.
Councilmember Pryor,
Aye.
Councilmember Lovell,
Aye.
Okay, that's 4 ayes, moving TMP 2721, full council. Next up is roundtable.
So I was wondering, I discussed this with you earlier, but Sheer Road, if you had a timeline for the overlay, because I've been getting quite a few emails regarding the condition of Sheer.
Yeah, so we did send staff out to take a look at the pavement condition of Sheer Road. This would be the section east of Ward Road towards 291 Highway. While we've already let our project for overlay this year, and I don't think there's enough capacity within that project to do it this year. I was just referring to our email correspondence that we sent back out earlier. It is now being scheduled into next year's overlay program. So between now and then, please contact Public Works with any patching needs or pothole needs that need to be done. Unfortunately, we aren't able to coordinate the overlay with the road reconstruction project, which is in the CIP, because it's several more years out on the horizon, and there's no way the pavement, even with our patching, it can last that long. So anticipate an overlay next year for Sheer Road, and then several more years down the road, a complete reconstruction.
Okay, thank you very much.
Michael, I had after the Legacy blast, I had a phone call from a constituent that reported to me that along Scruggs Road, just west of Blackwell, several cars, multiple cars, parked across the sidewalk. They had jumped the curb on the sidewalk, and they were within property. And number one, she said people had to walk in the street. People that did, you know, whether they were legally parked or not, they weren't walking the street. So her request was, what could the city do? And, you know, in discussions with her, you know, we talked about different scenarios, and no parking signs. Not necessarily be adhered to, but at least it would be posted. So if she were to, if things got dangerous and she were to call the police, you know, they've got something to go on. Right now, there's no parking signs. Now, I wouldn't think it would be legal to park on the sidewalk, jump the curb, park on the sidewalk on people's property. She did have a couple edged in there and backed into her trees, so.
So you're absolutely right. It is no parking on sidewalks. You can't legally park on a sidewalk. And those are the types of situations we don't sign no parking. Much like you can't park in front of a fire hydrant. You can't park in a situation that blocks somebody else's driveway. Can't park within so many feet of a mailbox. There's a lot of these, what we consider kind of generic no parking conditions. And I mean, there's thousands, countless number of situations throughout the city where it applies. And I think that's something where we can educate the public. Just call the police department. I think they're aware of those illegally parked circumstances, much like you can't park the wrong direction, you know, on a roadway. So those kind of situations, we don't need a no parking sign for a law enforcement officer to come out and issue a citation or to have a conversation and educate the public about the violation that's occurring. In regards to no parking signs on Scruggs itself, if we see some kind of parking activity on the road, that's where a sign would be necessary. It is no parking along Scruggs, as it is along, I believe, with extreme exception, along every major roadway in the city. It's no parking. You know, every Longview Road, Langsford Road, Scruggs, Todd George, it's just no parking on your arterial roads. And we typically had not signed those arterial roads because people don't try to park on them. But if we do see parking that begins to occur, we need to get the signs up for police to enforce that because it needs to be noticed in the form of a sign.
One of the other issues she did bring up is that there were a couple people that wanted to argue with her. Am I confused that Scruggs is also, you know, park property alongside the road because it's still mowed, still well kept. And so she thought that, again, no parking sign, if a no parking sign was actually there, then she could say, no, this is actually private property. If there isn't, it's no. And, you know, I've seen this park alongside the roads in Legacy, and I've seen them parked on Blackwell during certain, you know, soccer games. They park, and then they walk over the soccer fields. So they tend to think that we can park anywhere on park property, which of course is. So anyway, bottom line is she was wondering if we could look at just having a couple.
Absolutely, we can. In particular, in those areas where they're in closer proximity, where people might walk to a major event. We've had to put no parking signs on Blackwell. It's also no parking on both sides of the street. We'll have staff investigate Scruggs Road as well and nearby Legacy Park.
Thank you. Thank you. I have one other question. It doesn't have to do with parking, but since we're talking a lot about the airport tonight, is there any progress that could be reported on the application for the air traffic control tower? Still elementary, we're still very, very early, and I just thought,
Yeah, so that was, we had a follow-up meeting with the FAA, and it was a very interesting meeting. So as you recall, when we submitted our application, there was two forecasts that we used for the traffic. There was a terminal area forecast that, if you recall, was flat. You know, it showed 25 years, no growth. That was the official FAA terminal area forecast, which typically you would use for a study, a benefit cost study. Through the development of the master plan, however, we had our own terminal area, our own forecast that both MoDOT and FAA signed off on, that's the actual forecast. They realized that TAF, the terminal area forecast, was not accurate. Well, we ran and submitted the application using both numbers. And one, I think the benefit cost ratio came out at like 0.68. And then using the actual numbers, we came up with a 1.02. Well, when we sent that in to, as I recall, kind of talking about this in the past, that application, that was really, the fact that we were 1.02 didn't qualify us for the program. That was good enough for the FAA then to do their own study. So the FAA did their own study, and if they used the terminal area forecast, they hit our 0.68 spot on. When they used our area forecast, they didn't match our number for whatever reason, and we're not sure why. But their number was slightly below 1, which would not qualify. Now, the FAA was not keen to just say, oh, sorry, you're not 1, no. So they got together with us to kind of talk about it. Maybe we can try to figure out why their number's not matching ours when we're using, when they used our numbers where it did when they used the TAF. So our consultant's kind of looking into that. The FAA is kind of looking into that, so that discussion is ongoing. So right now, we just got a little weirdness in what we submitted and what the FAA is saying. So no definitive answer to your question, just in works.
but certainly with the increased hangar space that we may, like you said, we may not going to increase capacity because of the hangar space.
Right, and that's what when you look at our forecast, is based on, you know, that east side building and those hangars coming in and the aircraft operations increasing. So essentially, the fact that we're doing our east side infrastructure, we're doing hangar 2, I think that's going to keep us on track with our area forecast.
All right, well, thank you, sir, thank you. Okay, any other? F?
A couple of things. Want to acknowledge and recognize and thank Carrie Craver for joining Public Works more recently. And I know many of you know Carrie already. She's been with the city for over 20 years. Stops in development and police department, and now with Public Works. And welcome, Carrie. You'll see a lot more of her. And also just this opportunity, thank Cindy DeShazo for filling in for the last few months while we were looking for our office coordinator. So windy. The other is with our short agenda and topic of airport. I asked Mr. Penfield to come down and give a little background to our airport and noise complaints when we receive those, how we address noise complaints, what the public can do to help us respond more effectively to those kind of complaints, and address any other airport questions you have.
So good evening, Jeff Penfield, Assistant Airport Manager. Been with the city for 9 months. First opportunity to address the committee. Appreciate the opportunity very much. Joel's on vacation in sunny California and submits his greetings to everybody. We did not want to miss the opportunity to talk about, I call them noise concerns. Shaded a little bit differently, but we have indeed seen a influx of noise concerns over the last 3 weeks or so. If you, at the end of the fiscal year 23, if you take a look at all the takeoff and landings and the flyovers that we've had in the city, the number's about 28,000 total. Most of those are off of runway 18, the southerly flow runway. In the last 3 weeks, we've seen a spike in air traffic up to 3,000. So we're at a pace right now of 52,000 operations for the year. And with that spike, we have seen an increase from 1 or 2 noise concerns a month to where we received 6 over the last several weeks. And that's causes us concern. You know, Joel and I are very concerned about every noise concern that comes in. We want to be good neighbors. We think there's things that we can do that we're responsible for to be good neighbors, so we pay attention to each and every one of them. The good news is if we can get a tail number off the airplane that is making the noise, we have a system called ADSP to where we can go in and actually look at the flight path of that airplane during the time frame that the concern is raised, and we can evaluate ourselves on what we think about the concern. I think it's very important up front. We don't have a lot of jurisdiction over the airplanes in flight. You know, we're kind of we monitor. If we see something out of the ordinary, we can address it with the air crew. But if we see something unsafe or what we call a flagrant problem, we would and could submit word to the FAA. In the time that I've been there, and I think the time that Joel's been here for 10 years, we haven't had a case where somebody has done something unsafe. So with all that said, I'd like to show you, if I can understand how this works, just give you a little situational awareness of just these latest ones that we've seen. So this is a God's eye view. Up and down is 1836, so we're north up. And then the crossing runway 1129. What you see in red there is the FAA prescribed, approved traffic pattern that the pilots take, very standard across any airport in the U.S., that you have a rectangular traffic pattern. It's what we call left-hand traffic to land on run 18 to the south. So an airplane will take off to the south, turn left to a crosswind, turn left to a downwind, turn left to a base, and then left on final. If you reverse that for runway 36 is right turn, so all that traffic is staying out to the east, and then for 1129, similar, you can see the arrows there. So the 6 noise complaints that we've had in the last couple, 3 weeks. One, all the way up to the north, somebody called us from Sugar Creek. I tried to get a little bit more particulars on this one. I don't know why we're receiving that one. I called him today, and I just had the gentleman's voicemail, so not going to say a whole lot about that one. The preponderance of the concerns are coming out of the south, the Maple Tree neighborhood. Two out of the 3 from the south came out of that one, and then there's one individual just a little bit east, a little bit south of Maple Tree that has been concerned about the noise at the airport for several years, and we continue to hear from him, and we heard from him within the last couple of weeks. A new one up there in the north on that southern border there, Lakewood. We did have a cool day on Friday, which swung the winds around to the north. So Friday morning, we got a call about airplanes flying over her property. And then Sunday, we had the same. We had northerly wind, and we got the second complaint from the same individual. As I said, we go to town on every one of these. We really want to understand what's going on here. And you know, the summer months, one thing you got to appreciate is the weather's nice, people are going to fly. That's first and foremost, as that spike from 28,000 for the year to 3,000 in 3 weeks. Secondly, summer months, it's either going to be a southerly wind or it's going to be no wind, which drives our preferred runway on a no-wind day is a southerly flow. So typically, most of the noise concerns that's raised this time of year are coming out of the south, and that's why they're flying this pattern. It is not the jets. About 25% of our traffic, for the year are the business jets. We're not receiving any concerns at all from it's all the small single engine piston. If you look at the combination of the heat, so they're flying in the morning, the performance of the airplanes, in the heat, and then there's a FAA recommendation, which people take quite seriously, that when you take off of 1-8 or on the runways, if you're going to stay in the pattern and do touch and goes, you won't make that turn to crosswind in this case until you're within 300 feet of pattern altitude. A small little training airplane, it takes them about a mile to get to that 300 feet below 700 feet AGL before they make that turn. So the airplanes are turning later. And a new dynamic, good news, bad news, is just recently over the last 3 or 4 months, we have a new flight school now on the field, and they're flying. They have 4 airplanes. They're flying quite a bit. And most of, if not all, the noise concerns we've had recently are from training airplanes, staying in the pattern, taking off, turning base, turning downwind, and circling around, and coming in and around every 5-10 minutes or so. So I wanted to show you just to highlight the performance piece. So let's see how this is I don't know if you can see that, but the green lines in the bottom there going right over across of that maple tree neighborhood. So that would be a small 130 horsepower, 150 horsepower training airplane that is climbing out at 400 or 500 feet a minute, and it's going to take them that whole mile before they make that turn right over the top of that neighborhood. As compared to, and this is, oh, by the way, 7:30 this morning when I drove in. I saw this airplane, so I got on the system right away to see this. This is about 2 hours ago, and a higher performing airplane. So this is a 180 horsepower airplane. So it's coming off the runway. It's climbing at a more horsepower, higher VSI, higher rate of ascent, and it's getting to that 300 feet below pattern altitude sooner, so they're able to make the turn. So it's the combination of the heat, the lower performing airplanes, the flight school flying more in the pattern, and it's just stretching out that pattern right over top. Like I said, we take every concern, one-on-one. We know the people that are flying the airplane. We sit down. We've shown them the new flight school, specifically these charts, and so they can apply as much due diligence as they can to this issue. They realize it's an issue. They want the same thing that we want. They want to be, good neighbors as well. So they're very, very sensitive. The airport for years has had a fly-friendly program, which many highlights of that program will help in this situation, and we constantly remind people that we really need them to do that. And then something that Joel and I just recently have started kicking around is, these patterns, my understanding, have been set for over 30 years. And the city has changed a lot in 30 years. The airport has changed a lot in 30 years. We need to go in and take a look at these patterns and see if there's something that we can do. Can we adjust them to where we can minimize this noise? I got to emphasize, though, that is going to take a lot of due diligence to do right. The last thing that we want to do is, kick the can, make one neighborhood happy, and then we, wake up a couple of other neighborhoods. So we really want to go to town. We're going to bite the bullet and get in an airplane and fly some patterns and see if we can see something from the air to where we think that we can help with this problem. Our long-term strategic plan has this traffic flow on the plan. We know it's not going to get better. Sir, you mentioned the growth of the airport. It's going to continue to grow, and Lee Summit's going to continue to grow. And you know, we know there's plans on that east side that new neighborhoods will get in there someday. So we want to come up, you know, always be sensitive to what the citizens need and come up with a plan that will minimize. We're never going to, I think, ever get it to go away 100%, but minimize this concern over the noise that we're making. So pending any questions, that's all my comments.
Well, I just wanted to thank you. This is really helpful. I'm curious how the guy from Sugar Creek determined that the plane came out of Lee Summit. I mean, that's.
And you know, he said it was, you know, white, blue and white, and didn't have a tail number. I don't know. That's why I called him today. And I took the call. And unfortunately, when I took the call, I didn't know where Sugar Creek was, so I couldn't have questioned him at the time. But I called him back, and I couldn't get, so I don't know. We did, oh, by the way, we did have an airplane take off that morning, and it headed that way. But, you know, Sugar Creek is what, 10, 12 miles north, and the altitude that they would be at. Yeah. So.
But, yeah, I appreciate you talking about, you know, the noise and the different things that affect whether or not people can hear the planes, because I've visited with those people who live on the road to the airport, and they're just like, yeah, we don't hear them at all. You know, they never complain about noise at the airport. I also appreciate the fact that you made it sound like you all getting up in a plane and doing your due diligence sounds like a sacrifice on your part. So I thought that was really good.
What we do. We're dedicated.
I appreciate that. Make sure it's a really nice jet. Maybe you can find somebody to loan that to us.
They go by too fast. We'll do a little smaller.
But no, I appreciate this information. I know there's one neighborhood up in Lakewood that's within your flight pattern, and I've talked to several people up there who talk about their decks will shake when certain planes go by. And so maybe if we can get them out of that flight pattern, that may help a little bit. But I appreciate your time on this.
And it is, you know, if I didn't say it, it definitely, we don't get any complaints out of the north when we're landing to the south. So those airplanes that are coming around on the red line to the south, it's the, you know, power it up, climbing out. And as I said before, you know, everybody's doing a good job complying, but unfortunately there's neighborhoods right underneath that flight path.
Thank you. So I live just south of the airport, but in downtown, and we have airplanes that fly over us all the time. But I love it. I love the sound of the airplanes. And I think most people around me love it too. The only time, remember whenever, it was quite a while ago, it was like some women's competition, women pilot competition several years ago. They flew so low, they set off our Ring doorbell. One of them did. Wow. It was crazy, yeah. But I love hearing all the airplanes go over. And I love seeing the increase of like the really cool, like high dollar jets. Pretty recently, there's been a lot. So it's been awesome. Thank you.
Well, you know, proportionally, it really is. I mean, so 6 complaints, 3,000. It's a small, but you have to address that, right? I mean, one is one too many. And if there's something that we can do, we should definitely should do that due diligence, try to figure it out.
I also, were you done? I also, of course, some of the jets when they take off, they actually go over my house, which I'm pretty long ways away, but they're you hear them. But sort of piggybacking on my question about the air traffic, if and when that ever happens, then that would give somebody actually in a tower to control where those planes. I mean, I can probably summarize, or you know, I imagine that some people on the smaller, you know, piston planes, effort climb, they don't realize that they're out over maybe, I mean, there would be more control is my question, I guess.
I think where the tower will help in this is something Joel and I have kicked around a little bit. So right now, if the wind is calm, the preferred runway is 1-8, so south. So, and those lower performing airplanes are going to turn crosswind right over top of that neighborhood. So why don't we make the preferred runway 1-1 out to the southeast? So it's that one on that thing, right? Well, one concern would be, well, the bigger jets aren't gonna fly off a 4,000-foot runway, so you have a conflict. Well, if you have a tower, you can, the tower can be advised, send the small guys off of the crossing runway, and the jets are always gonna want the 1836, and let them deal with that problem, right? So that's where a tower, and you already see it out there, right? I mean, the air crew can pick whatever runway they want, and you do see, like after the AFC Championship game, you see them going all over the place, right? A tower can definitely help that. So, big thing on the tower is the safety that it brings, but it can help with this problem without a doubt. The more, in my opinion, the more control when you're really busy with that kind of operations.
I have another question, more of a personal question. Flies or something like that. But I was just wondering, I mean, it's not a very big jet. It only holds about that land and take off at least some.
Runway wise, with a nominal takeoff and landing, yes. Takeoff, if you're heavy, if they had any kind of problem, they probably would want more runway out in front of them. And the bigger concern is, well, just day to day, is just the weight of the airplane. The concrete can only take so much weight. I don't know what those run, but I know like a Gulfstream, like a G7, they're pushing the limit of our concrete. So we would be concerned about that. But I think, from 5,500-foot runway, that's quite a bit. And, you can go out there and watch the bigger ones take off, and they're not even using half of it. But if they had something critical happen right at rotation, they'd have their hands full. Can the darn thing stop by the time they hit the end of the runway? I think that'd be the concern.
That's good discussion. Thank you very much for this information. This is very helpful. I mean,
More to follow, I promise. All right, thank you.
You have something, Michael?
Yeah, I just wanted to really emphasize one point. I mean, Jeff makes a good point, and, it's been 30 years since we've evaluated that traffic pattern, and maybe we can look at that. But I'm going to make it very clear, there's very limited options that we have. That rectangular pattern is the standard FAA pattern. They are there for safety reasons. We do have two non-standard patterns right now. Left traffic, like Jeff described, where you take off and make left turns, that is a standard pattern. So typically you would see those rectangles on either side of the runway. And we have two of our runways use right traffic. That's a non-standard, and it's usually done for noise abatement. 30 years ago, the concerns were different. Now that one right traffic kind of puts him over a neighborhood. So maybe it's time, do we need to reevaluate that and switch that back to left? Of course, when you do that now, well, we've got the hospital over here, and we've got some other things, to take into consideration. So I did want to make it clear, there's not, it is limited what we can do. A lot of times with our noise concerns, people suggest, well, can we change the pattern? Can we have them fly over the highways and do things like that? And that all sounds good. But there again, when you're flying this standard pattern, it's really all about the numbers. You take off, you maintain runway heading, you get your best climb till you're within 300 foot of pattern, and then you make your turn. And different airplanes reach that altitude different, as Jeff pointed out. Temperature and air density altitude has an impact on that. And so we're not, the pilot's not looking down saying, oh, there's 470, yeah, I got to turn now. Well, if it's a hot, muggy day, he may be 300 foot above ground, and it's not safe. I mean, these patterns are there for safety. So certainly something we want to look at, but I did want to just emphasize a point that our options are pretty limited. So.
I just, thank you guys. I think it's remarkable that people complain about the noise, to be quite frank. And you guys do a great job there of doing everything you can. I actually get excited when planes fly over. I run out to see what, I mean, we're on a huge pattern for like a Delta and Southwest that flies over New Longview every day. It's like, so I find it remarkable that people complain about this living near an airport. But anyway, thank you for all you do.
Also in a direct path. Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. Well, any other roundtable? Anybody?
Oh, thank you.
Well, with that then, I will call this.